Hello Year 11. Just wanted to talk you through the slideshow that I showed you the other day. We didn't really spend a lot of time on it, we ran out of time. So I just wanted to talk you through it, all about revision for the mock exams. So what we're going to do, I'm going to talk through literature first of all, which is actually your second paper. It's on Monday the 20th. And as part of that, I'm going to refresh your memory of introductions and conclusions. And then I'm going to go through the language paper in a little more detail. So to start with literature, you've seen this slide before. This is a coursework you've been working tirelessly on, and you've now all emailed to Miss Gray, or have you? And this is our paper. So we know that we've got an unseen question, we've got an anthology poetry question, and we've got modern prose, which is of mice and men. Now you know that this is just one question that everybody has to answer. This one, you will have a choice of two, and you answer the one that you're most comfortable with. And for the of mice and men question, again, you've got a choice of two. And we've talked through the timings in some detail, so I'll just leave that on there. I don't need to go over that. What I want to start with really though is to start at the beginning. So you know this slide, you know what it means by now. Quick recap: hook, text, thesis statement. So your hook. These are our examples of hooks. The hook should be a bold statement related to the question. So my statement here is on isolation, and we talk through these two examples of hooks. At no point have I mentioned Steinbeck, have I mentioned the title of the novel, nothing. Okay, I've just really focused on this key buzzword of the title. Isolation is inescapable, or what happens in a community in which isolation is ingrained as hard work. This is quite a confident way to start with a question, but really it's whatever you're comfortable with. You just want to make a really nice, bold, confident statement straight away. And then that will lead you into obviously needing to identify what you're going to be writing about. So now we go on to In of Mice and Men. Steinbeck paints a sympathetic picture of itinerant workers who live and work in a microcosm yet rarely find companionship. So now you're relating this idea to the text that you're going to discuss. And then moving on, you then go on to your thesis statement. So you've already done you started off by making a quick 2, maybe 3 minute plan. You've done a quick spidergram. You've chosen what your 3 paragraphs are going to be about. So your thesis statement needs to have an opinion and identify your 3 subtopics, 1, 2, 3. And this is the example here, we talked about it. The opinion is by saying skillfully foreshadows. So that's an opinion word. The ultimate isolation. I'm forming a judgment there. I'm saying that there can be no more isolated. And then I've talked through exactly what I'm going to mention in my essay. Attitudes that would today be racist, prejudiced against the disabled, and encouraging us to see enforced isolation as an evil that must be eradicated. Alright, so we've got Lenny's death, racism, and prejudice against the disabled. There'll be my 3 paragraphs. And you're going to write your essay, your beautifully crafted essay, and this I'm suggesting is how you conclude it. So this is slightly adapted from what I previously gave you. I want you to restate your thesis statement in a new way. That's the first thing. So if I go back one, this was our thesis statement. Lenny's death, let's just go like this. Lenny's death is my first paragraph. Racist attitudes is my second, and prejudice against the disabled is my third. So when I restate this thesis statement, it's going to be at the end of my essay, obviously. And also I want you to emphasise the importance of one point. So let's look at it. While both Crooks and Candy are isolated due to their perceived weaknesses, well, obviously I'm talking about Crooks when related to race, and Candy related to prejudice against the disabled. There's 2. neither of which either character is in control. I'm not quite sure that's perfectly worded. Perhaps it is Lenny's isolation that proves the most tragic. So there we go, little green. I've got my 3 paragraphs here, but what I've done is I've emphasised the importance of 1 point. So I've evaluated, which is a high level skills in the top band. So this is how to tie it together at the end. You're evaluating, you're forming a judgment here. He is the one character who truly believes he has a companion. His life being taken shatters this illusion, along with any hope that true companionship can be achieved within this context. Alright, so there's the start of my conclusion, and the second thing I'm going to do is this little gentleman with the loudhailer is shouting a message, and it's exactly what Steinbeck's doing. So there's again the first part of my conclusion. Finally, I'm going to end by looking at the message. Steinbeck presents a bleak image of life for 30s itinerant workers. Remember, we're constantly talking about context in this essay. Perhaps insinuating that if society refuses to evolve to truly become one of greater acceptance, the future is only one of soldad-esque solitude. Esque is a suffix that you could use along with many other nouns. So I'm saying that this is like soldad. And so I've formed a judgment with my very, very final sentence. And I think this, if you follow this form, this way of writing your conclusion, it's going to wrap up your essay beautifully. And if you top and tail your essay with an amazing hook and an amazing message, then you're encouraging the examiner to give you the highest marks possible. So there's intros and conclusions. Let's look at 3 questions you're going to answer. The first one you will see is the unseen poetry question. You've got a poem, you've probably never seen it before, and you're going to have a question that asks you to focus on some sort of theme in a poem. Let's stick with isolation. How is isolation shown in the poem? Poem about isolation. I'm going to suggest you aim for this. So you're going to write an intro, a short introduction, but make sure you have your hook in there. You've got 3 paragraphs, 1, 2, 3, trying to follow this structure, which I'll talk through in a minute, and a conclusion. The conclusion should be doing exactly what I just showed you here, trying to tie together the message. Now if you see, it's 20 marks, and as I told you in the lesson for literature, if you see the marks, add 10 and you've got your minutes. So 20 marks, 30 minutes. This is, I think, really tight time limit. So you're going to need to really push yourself. Your pen should be moving constantly. We're going to follow this paragraph structure which we've used on many occasions. You must remember it. You don't have to stick to it rigidly, but it's a good way to hang your paragraphs together. And as we talked in the lesson, this little thing right here, this red box, draws attention to the fact that this is where the marks are. This is where the real marks are. So get your point down, embed some evidence, and then get into your analysis. Okay, I'm not going to talk too much about that. Then we're going to go for the anthology question. As you know, you're going to get 2 questions. You only choose one of them. And as you know again, 30 marks, add 10, you've got your minutes, 40 minutes. Now for this is slightly different. I'm going to suggest an intro, 4 paragraphs, talk through them in a second, and a conclusion. So intro, conclusion, again exactly the same techniques, but your paragraph's slightly different. So we're going to start with a comparison, and then I'm going to suggest you just focus on your first poem. So focus on one poem and say how is, let's keep with isolation, how is isolation presented in Remember and Sonnet 116. So you start with a comparison, you're going to just talk about your first poem here, and then your second paragraph does this. It's going to make constant comparisons. How is it similar? Move through. How does it compare and contrast, and evaluate both poets' message. So your second paragraph really is ticking that comparison box. You're constantly comparing the two poems, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And that's the more strong comparisons you can get, the higher level the skill that you're showing is effectively. I'm going to suggest you try this technique again. So for paragraphs 3 and 4, you're going to do another point, another paragraph here, and then follow this structure again. Now again, you may feel like you're pushed for time, in which case I feel like it's acceptable to squeeze these two together in one more comparative paragraph of both poems. So think of a different way that they are similar, and then just compare the two as heavily as you can. I think this is the ideal scenario, but depending on your timing, at least make sure you get another comparison paragraph here. And then we move to the big question, which is of mice and men, which you've been doing amazingly with all term. 40 marks, add 10, 50 minutes. And for that reason, I'm going to suggest you answer this question first. It's worth double the marks of the unseen poetry question. Plus, this is the question, remember, you won't have your copy of the novella. You will have the copy of the anthology for this, but you won't have the novella. So while all your quotes, all your ideas are fresh in your head, get them down on paper as quick as you can. Make your plan. Intro, paragraph 1, 2, 3, conclusion. Nice and simple. I don't need to go into this in any more detail. You've been doing very, very well on this. All right. Do not forget, for this question, it's key that you talk about context, and you talk about it with these two beautiful characters. Remember them? We have Terry text, we have Katie context, and they are madly and passionately in love, have a beautiful relationship, so much so that this ring actually joins both of their fingers. They are inseparable, and in your essay, your text and your context are also inseparable. Whenever you talk about context, you will also talk about how it relates to characters in the text or themes in the text. That's what that slide's about. You know it. All you do to remember that: Terry text, Katie context. Oops. Oh dear. Here we go. Madly in love again. All right. So I'm done with literature. Let's move on to language. You've done your coursework, imaginative writing and poetry and prose comparison, and your beautiful commentaries that everyone's emailed to Miss Gray. Exam paper looks like this. We're going to start with our reading section and then move on to the writing section. Just take a look at the timings here. This is really mirrored in your revision guide that you all picked up from me in our last lesson. This one, I suggest, may shift to 40 minutes because you've got a fair amount of reading to do, a fair amount. But even so, if you add all these up, 40, if you do the maths on that, that's still 120, yeah, which still leaves you 15 minutes, because this is 2 hours and 15 minutes, this paper. So maybe we'll stick with that. It'll leave you 15 minutes kind of fluff time. This should be a 50 actually. Sorry. I thought that was a bit wrong. So originally, okay, bear with me. Originally this looked like this. So if you add those up, that adds up to 120 minutes. Your whole exam is 2 hours and 15 minutes. So that's 135. So if you do that, then it still leaves you 5 minutes to be checking your work. But we'll kind of talk about that in the first week back anyway, this exam. First few questions, they're all about selecting and interpreting information, ideas and perspectives. They should be giving you confidence. That's what the examiner is going to do. They're trying to give you some confidence as you go into the more testing language questions. So let's have a look at some examples. Easy as 1, 2, 3. The first one. Question 1 is going to be 2 marks, and it will always look like this. From lines 1 to blank, select 2 words or phrases that describe, and it will give you a focus or a foci here. Remember, questions 1, 2 and 3 are focused on an unseen extract. So it will be an article, it will be a biography extract, it could be a report, something like that, a non-fiction. And so you read it and you select your words, you fill in the 2 bullet points, simple as that. It's just an information retrieval task. Question 2 is very similar. Look again at lines blank to blank. In your own words, describe or explain what the writer does, thinks about, and then it will give you something for them to think about. No. And basically, you're looking constantly in the language paper. When you see the marks, you know how many different points you need to make. So I'm going to make 1 point, 2 point, 3 point, 4 point, and then the examiner is going to look through the mark scheme. They're going to have about 6 or 7 different points that if you've said any of those, you will get the marks, and that's how they're going to do it. They're basically going to tick them off as you go. 1, 2, 3, 4. Nice and straightforward. And question 3, it's worded a little differently, but actually the mark scheme is exactly the same. So from lines X to X, and this will now be towards the end of the text, so you'll have worked your way through. It says explain/describe something. So maybe explain/describe the beautiful fauna in Mr. Doig's apartment. Alright. Now, remember what I said. 5 marks means you are going to have to make 5 different points. So, the mark scheme, really, if I do that, the mark scheme just looks like this. It's just a list of, how many have I got there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There's going to be 8 different points on the examiner's mark scheme. 8 different things. When they look at what you've written in your lovely paragraph, all they're doing is ticking off which ones of these you've done. So if I say, oh yeah, they've written that one, that's 1 mark. They've written that, that's another mark. They've written that, that's another mark. They've written that one, but they've missed all these, 1, 2, 3, 4. They haven't said any of these. Then, quite simply, you're going to get 4 marks. So you really need to focus on what the question is asking you to do. You can support it with brief quotations. I'd suggest brief quotations, 3 to 5 words perhaps. But you're just trying to make as many points as possible. You do not have to analyse any language, any structural techniques, nothing like that at all. You're simply looking to get 5 pieces of information to back up whatever they've asked you to look for here. That's it. Then you go to question 4. Question 4 is on an anthology extract that you have seen and studied before. In what ways does a writer use language and structure to? You should support your answer with close reference to the extract, including brief quotes. Now this is what you're assessed on here. You've got 12 marks, and this is your language and structure analysis question. So you're assessed on how well you analyse language, which you've been doing all year in literature, and structure, and the effects of vocabulary, sentence structure, and other language features. If you want to get in the top band, which is 11 and 12 marks, you have to look at vocabulary and sentence structure and other language features. You have to. If you don't do one of these, you can't get in the top band here. And your choice of references is going to be crucial. So you're probably going to write 3 paragraphs, language and structure analysis paragraphs here. Maybe 1 on vocab, 1 on a key sentence structure, and 1 on something else that you find. Question 5 is then going to compare both of the extracts you've read so far. Compare, and it will look like this really. Compare how they present ideas and perspectives about their experiences, or about this might be slightly different. And for this, you're assessed on a range, what comparisons you make, how many strong comparisons you make, analysis of perspectives, the themes, the language, but this time it's and or the structure. So if you're analysing language but not structure, you're actually not penalised in the top band. I would always suggest you look at both, and obviously the themes, but I just wanted to draw your attention to the fact that you could still get in the top band without analysing the structure or without analysing the language. And you're assessed on your selection of references. So again, you've got 22 marks. I think when I was back on my original slide here, I'm suggesting you spend 40 minutes on this, because it's a lot of marks. It's the biggest reading question. So you're going to write some paragraphs on comparing these back and forth. Perhaps 4 paragraphs would be a good strategy, 4 comparisons going back and forth between the two. And that's, use your analysis skills you've been using all year. And then finally, onto my final slide. Thank God for that. Question 6 or 7. This is the only question on the exam, on the language exam, that you get a choice for. It's your writing. It's worth 45 marks. And I put very clearly here, see the revision guide. The revision guide was put together not by me, but by the English department, and it's really, really strong when it comes to transactional writing in particular. I want you to think, you'll be asked to write a news article or a speech or a magazine article, something like that, and you'll be given a focus. So maybe you have to persuade your audience, maybe you have to inform them, maybe you have to explain, and you'll be given an audience too. So is it a broadsheet, an upmarket newspaper? Is it a speech to old age pensioners? Is it a speech to your peers? So you're assessed on how well you actually address your audience when we look here. Communicate effectively and imaginatively, adapting form, tone and register for specific purposes. So this is how well you write towards your specific audience and for your specific purpose. And this is your creativity, how well you use your language and your structure in order to get your ideas across. And then this is the one question where you're assessed for your accuracy. The one question on either paper, in fact. This is about a range of vocabulary and sentence structures, and the key word, which I'm going to make huge here, is the word range. You must vary your vocabulary from the simplistic to the much higher level. You must vary your sentence structures. You'll be using a simple sentence right next to a complex sentence for effect. Maybe your sentences develop in complexity. And your paragraphs should also be short, contrasted with long. Okay, trying to do it for specific effects. And your accuracy is assessed too on this question. And I think that's where I'm going to leave it. You've got 3 weeks. We've talked through how to revise properly by looking at your paper, covering it up, testing yourself, writing as much as you can possibly write down, and then checking. That's an effective way of revising. And just do your best, and I'll see you in the new year. My email's always on. And so concludes my little message to you. All the best, Merry Christmas, and a Happy New Year.